The rain hammered against the gallery windows as Claire Bennett stood before her favorite painting, a watercolor of a lighthouse standing strong against stormy seas. She had come to the charity art auction not to bid, but to dream. The ticket had cost her a week's worth of grocery money, but sometimes the soul needed feeding more than the stomach. Her worn canvas bag hung from her shoulder, holding student assignments she would grade later that night after her shift at the diner ended at midnight. Claire taught art at an underfunded elementary school, served coffee at a busy cafe, and waited tables 3 nights a week. At 28, she had watched her dreams of becoming a professional artist fade into something she only whispered about in the dark. Life had taught her that survival mattered more than passion, that paying rent trumped painting canvases. Yet here she was, stealing moments of beauty wherever she could find them. The billionaire in the shadows across the room, Nathan Holloway watched the crowd with tired eyes. At 35, he had built a technology empire that had made him one of the youngest billionaires in the country. His company had revolutionized online security, protecting millions of users worldwide. But tonight, surrounded by wealthy donors who saw him as a checkbook rather than a person, he felt more alone than ever. His tailored suit fit perfectly, his dark hair was styled impeccably, and his expression remained carefully neutral. It was the armor he wore to survive in a world that had taken too much from him. 2 years ago, his wife Rebecca had died in a car accident, leaving him with a 5-year-old daughter who barely spoke anymore. Lily had retreated into silence, her vibrant spirit dimmed by grief that Nathan did not know how to heal. He had hired the best nannies, the most qualified therapists, but nothing reached the little girl who spent hours staring out windows, waiting for a mother who would never return home. An accidental collision. Claire did not see the man stepping backward until she collided with him, her bag tumbling to the floor, spilling papers and art supplies across the polished marble. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she dropped to her knees, scrambling to gather scattered drawings and broken pencils. Strong hands joined hers, collecting the papers with careful precision. "I am so sorry," Claire stammered, not daring to look up. "I should have been paying attention." "The fault was mine," a deep voice replied. "I backed up without looking." When Claire finally raised her eyes, she found herself staring into the face of Nathan Holloway. She recognized him instantly. From magazine covers and news articles, his photographs never captured the exhaustion in his eyes or the sadness that seemed to radiate from him like cold winter air. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, 2 strangers kneeling on a gallery floor, surrounded by scattered pieces of children's artwork. Nathan glanced at the papers in his hands. They were filled with colorful drawings, clearly made by young students. One caught his attention, a picture of a family holding hands under a rainbow with the words, "Love never ends," written in crayon at the bottom. Something in his chest tightened painfully. "You are a teacher," he said quietly. Claire nodded, taking the papers from him and tucking them carefully back into her bag. "Elementary school art. It does not pay much, but the children make every difficult day worthwhile. An offer too strange to believe." They stood together, the auction continuing around them, but Nathan seemed frozen in place. He studied Claire with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. She saw him notice her worn shoes, her second-hand dress, the tired lines around her eyes that came from working too hard and sleeping too little. Most wealthy people looked through her as if she did not exist. Nathan looked at her as if she were a puzzle he needed to solve. "Would you be willing to meet me for coffee tomorrow?" he asked suddenly. "I have a proposition that might interest you." Claire's first instinct was to refuse. She did not have time for mysterious meetings with billionaires who probably wanted nothing more than to feel charitable by offering her some small kindness. but something in his expression stopped her from declining. There was desperation there hidden beneath the polished exterior. She recognized it because she wore the same mask every day. "What kind of proposition?" she asked cautiously. Nathan glanced around the crowded gallery, then pulled a business card from his pocket. "Something that could change both our lives. Please, just one conversation. If you decide it is not for you, you walk away with no obligation." Claire took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. The embossed letters spelled out his name and a phone number, nothing more. "Tomorrow at 10, she said finally. "There is a small cafe on 5th Street called Morning Light. I will meet you there." Nathan nodded, relief crossing his features. "Thank you. I know this seems unusual, but I promise you, what I have to offer is genuine." The sleepless night. That night, Claire lay awake in her tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling while her mind raced through possibilities. What could Nathan Holloway possibly want from her? She was nobody special, just another struggling artist, trying to survive in an expensive city. Yet something about their brief encounter had felt significant, as if fate had pushed them together for a reason she could not yet understand. The next morning, she dressed carefully in her best outfit, a simple blue dress that she reserved for parent-teacher conferences. Her hands shook as she applied minimal makeup, trying to look professional despite the butterflies rioting in her stomach. The cafe was nearly empty when she arrived, and Nathan was already waiting at a corner table, 2 cups of coffee steaming, before him. "Thank you for coming," he said as she sat down. "I know yesterday was strange. Let me explain." The life-changing offer Nathan spoke for nearly 20 minutes, his voice low and urgent. He told her about Lily, about the daughter who had stopped painting and singing, who moved through life like a ghost. He explained how every nanny he hired treated his daughter like a job rather than a child, how the therapists used clinical language that made Lily retreat further into herself. He had watched dozens of applications, read hundreds of references, but none of them felt right. Then he had seen Claire's students' artwork, had watched how gently she handled their drawings, how her face softened when she looked at their creations. Something had clicked in his mind. A desperate hope that perhaps this woman who taught children to see beauty might be able to reach his daughter. "I want to hire you to be Lily's caregiver," Nathan said, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup. "Not as a nanny, but as someone who can help her remember joy. Someone who can teach her that life still holds color and magic despite the darkness. We have been through." Claire opened her mouth to respond, but Nathan continued, his words tumbling out faster now. "I will pay you $1.5 million for 1 year of your time. You will live in my home, have your own private quarters, and your only responsibility will be spending time with Lily, teaching her art, reading to her, helping her heal. If at any point you want to leave, you keep whatever you have earned up to that moment." The number hit Claire like a physical blow. $1.5 million. It was more money than she could earn in 20 lifetimes of teaching and serving. Coffee. It could pay off her student loans, help her sister through college, allow her to finally pursue her art without fear of starvation. It was impossible. It was insane. It was everything she had never dared to dream. The decision that changed everything. Claire looked at Nathan Holloway, really looked at him, and saw past the wealth and power to the grieving father beneath. She saw a man who loved his daughter so desperately that he was willing to make an unconventional arrangement with a stranger. She saw her own reflection in his eyes, someone who understood loss and struggle, someone who knew that money could buy many things, but not the most important ones. "Why me?" she asked softly. "You could hire anyone." Nathan met her gaze steadily. "Because when you picked up those drawings yesterday, you treated them like treasures. Because I saw you looking at that lighthouse painting with such longing it hurt to watch. Because something tells me you understand what it means to keep going. When everything inside you wants to give up, Lily needs someone like that. She needs someone real." Claire's hands trembled as she reached across the table. "I will do it," she whispered. "Not just for the money, though heaven knows I need it. but because no child should have to carry that kind of sadness alone. I will do everything I can to help her find her light again." Nathan's expression crumbled with relief, and for a moment, Claire saw tears glisten in his eyes before he blinked them away. They shook hands across the table, sealing an agreement that neither of them fully understood yet. Neither realized that this moment, this desperate bargain, would become the foundation of something neither had believed possible anymore. Love. Claire stood before the massive iron gates of the Holloway estate, her single suitcase feeling impossibly small beside her. The mansion rose 3 stories high, all glass and stone, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens that looked like something from a magazine. For a moment, doubt crashed over her like a wave. What was she doing here? She was a public school art teacher, not someone who belonged in a world of marble fountains and circular driveways. Nathan met her at the front door himself, surprising her. She had expected a butler or housekeeper, someone hired to maintain, the distance wealthy people preferred. Instead, he wore jeans and a simple gray sweater, his hair slightly rumpled as if he had been running his fingers through it. He looked more human than he had at the cafe, less like the billionaire from magazine covers and more like a tired father desperate for help. "Welcome," he said, taking her suitcase. "Let me show you to your room, and then I will introduce you to Lily." Meeting the silent child, Claire's quarters were more spacious than her entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens, a king-sized bed, and an attached bathroom with a soaking tub. But she barely noticed the luxury. Her attention was already focused on the little girl she had come here to help. Lily Holloway sat in the sunroom, surrounded by untouched toys and books. She was small for 5 years old, with dark curly hair like her father's and enormous brown eyes that seemed to hold decades of sadness. She wore a yellow dress with flowers on it, but her posture was rigid, her hands folded neatly in her lap. When Claire entered the room, Lily glanced up briefly before returning her gaze to the window. Nathan crouched beside his daughter, his voice gentle. "Lily, sweetheart, this is Miss Claire. She is going to spend time with you, maybe do some painting and drawing. Would you like that?" The little girl said nothing, but Claire noticed her fingers twitch slightly at the mention of painting. It was the smallest reaction, but it gave Claire hope. "Hello, Lily," Claire said softly, sitting on the floor a few feet away, careful not to invade the child's space. "Your daddy told me you have a beautiful playroom. Maybe later you could show it to me. I brought some special watercolors that make the prettiest colors when you mix them together." Lily remained silent, but her eyes flickered toward Claire for just a second longer this time. Nathan squeezed his daughter's shoulder gently before standing, gesturing for Claire to follow him out. The patient approach in the hallway, Nathan's composure cracked. "She used to talk constantly," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "She would sing made-up songs and tell elaborate stories about dragons and princesses. Now she barely speaks. The doctors say she will heal in her own time. But watching her like this, so distant, it destroys me every single day." Claire placed a hand on his arm without thinking, then quickly withdrew it, remembering this was her employer, but Nathan had noticed the gesture, and something in his expression softened. "I promise you, I will be patient with her. Healing cannot be rushed, but it can be encouraged. Give me time." For the next 3 days, Claire simply existed in Lily's presence. She would sit in the sunroom with her sketchpad, drawing flowers and birds and clouds, narrating her process in a gentle voice. "See how the blue mixes with the yellow to make green? That is like magic happening right on the paper." She never pressured Lily to respond or participate. She just created a safe, calm space where art happened naturally. The breakthrough moment on. The 4th morning, Claire was painting a rainbow when she felt a small presence beside her. Lily had moved from her chair and now stood inches away, watching the brush move across the paper. Claire's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm, to not make a big deal of this enormous step. "Would you like to try?" Claire asked casually, offering a clean brush. Lily hesitated, then reached out with trembling fingers. She took the brush and dipped it in red paint, then made a single stroke across the paper. It was shaky and uncertain, but it was something. Claire felt tears prick her eyes, but blinked them away. "That is beautiful," she whispered. "You have a wonderful touch. Want to try another color?" Lily nodded, the first clear response she had given. They painted together in silence for nearly an hour, and when Nathan came to check on them, he froze in the doorway. His daughter was smiling just slightly as she mixed colors on the palette. Nathan's walls begin to crack. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Nathan found Claire in the kitchen making tea. "What you did today," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I have not seen her smile in 2 years. How did you reach her so quickly?" Claire turned to face him, seeing the vulnerability in his expression. "I did not try to fix her or change her. I just gave her space to remember what joy feels like. Sometimes healing starts with the smallest moments, not the big breakthroughs." Nathan moved closer, and Claire was suddenly aware of how intimate this felt, standing in the dim kitchen, with only the sound of the kettle whistling between them. "You are remarkable," he said quietly. "I hired you to help my daughter, but I think you might be saving both of us." The words hung in the air, charged with meaning neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Claire busied herself with the tea, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened when Nathan was near. Rediscovering passion as weeks passed, something unexpected happened. While teaching Lily to paint, Claire rediscovered her own love for art. She began waking early to capture the sunrise over the gardens, staying up late to work on canvases she had not touched in years. The mansion had a studio space that Nathan had set up for his late wife, and he offered it to Claire without hesitation. "Rebecca would have wanted it used," he said, opening the door to reveal a room flooded with natural light, easels and supplies still waiting. "She painted portraits mostly. She said art was how she understood people, how she saw their souls." Claire noticed how Nathan spoke about his wife without the crushing grief she had expected. There was sadness, yes, but also warmth and acceptance. "Tell me about her," Claire said gently, sharing stories, building trust. They sat together in the studio while Lily napped, and Nathan talked about Rebecca, how they had met in college, how she had been fierce and funny and completely unimpressed by his family's money, how she had supported his business dreams while building her own art career, how the accident had been sudden and senseless, a drunk driver running a red light on a Tuesday afternoon. "For a long time, I was angry," Nathan admitted. "Angry at the world, at fate, at myself for not being there. But Lily needed me, and anger was a luxury I could not afford. So I buried it and tried to be strong. Maybe I buried too much because somewhere along the way, I forgot how to feel anything at all." Claire reached for his hand, and this time she did not pull away. "Grief does not have a timeline. You are allowed to still be healing too." Nathan looked at their joined hands, then up at her face. "You make me feel like maybe it is okay to be human again. Like maybe there is room in this life for something more than just surviving." The moment stretched between them, filled with possibility and fear. Claire knew she should step back, should remember the contract and the boundaries. But something had shifted between them, something neither could deny. The gallery surprise one evening, Nathan asked Claire to join him for dinner after Lily was asleep. He had been mysterious all day, and when she entered the dining room, she gasped. Her paintings, the ones she had been working on in the studio, were displayed on easels throughout the room, illuminated by soft lighting. "I took the liberty of photographing your work and sending it to a gallery owner I know," Nathan said, watching her reaction carefully. She wants to feature you in her next exhibition. Claire, your art deserves to be seen. You have real talent, not just as a teacher, but as an artist. Claire's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. No one had ever believed in her work like this, had ever taken her dreams seriously. Nathan, I do not know what to say. He moved closer, his eyes intense. Say you will do the showing. Say you will let the world see what I see when I look at your paintings. Say you will stop hiding your light. The line blurs. They stood inches apart, the air between them electric. Claire could feel her professional resolve crumbling. This was not supposed to happen. She was here for Lily, for the money, for the opportunity. She was not supposed to fall for the grieving widower with sad eyes and a generous heart. We should not, she whispered, even as she swayed toward him. I know, Nathan replied, but he did not move away. But Claire, I cannot stop thinking about you. The way you love my daughter, the way you bring color back into this house, the way you make me believe that maybe happiness is still possible. Before either could second guess, their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home. It was gentle and desperate all at once, filled with months of growing connection and denied attraction. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. This complicates everything, Claire said, her forehead resting against his. Nathan smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him. Maybe some complications are worth it. As they stood together in the dining room, surrounded by Claire's paintings and the promise of something new, neither noticed Lily standing in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit and smiling at the two people who had become her whole world. 11 months had passed since Claire first walked through the gates of Holloway Mansion, and the calendar on her phone seemed to mock her with every passing day. The contract was nearly over. In 3 weeks, she would collect her final payment and return to her old life, except her old life no longer existed. The woman who had desperately accepted a strange proposal from a grieving billionaire had transformed into someone entirely different. Claire sat in the studio at dawn, unable to paint. Her upcoming gallery showing should have filled her with excitement, but instead she felt hollow. How could she leave Lily, who now chattered constantly about butterflies and mermaids and all the things she wanted to paint? How could she walk away from Nathan, whose laughter had become her favorite sound, whose touch made her feel alive in ways she had never imagined? They had been careful over the months, stealing kisses when Lily was asleep, holding hands during late-night conversations, but never discussing what would happen when the contract ended. It was as if speaking the words would make the approaching deadline more real. The unspoken truth. Nathan stood at his office window, staring at the gardens where Claire and Lily were painting together. His assistant had just reminded him about the final contract payment, and the reminder had hit him like a punch to the gut. He had structured the agreement for exactly 1 year because that had seemed safe, contained, manageable. He had never imagined falling in love. Rebecca's portrait hung on the wall behind his desk, and for the first time in years, he did not feel guilty looking at it. His late wife smiled out from the canvas, forever young and vibrant. He had loved her deeply, had thought that kind of love only came once in a lifetime. But Claire had shown him that the heart had more capacity than he had believed possible. Loving her did not diminish what he had shared with Rebecca. It simply proved that life could offer second chances to those brave enough to accept them. But was Claire brave enough? Was he? The contract gave her an easy exit, a clean break with enough money to pursue her dreams anywhere in the world. Why would she choose to stay with a complicated man and his daughter when freedom waited just 3 weeks away? Lily's innocent question. That evening, as Claire tucked Lily into bed, the little girl wrapped her arms around Claire's neck and whispered the question that shattered everything. Are you going to be my new mommy? Claire's breath caught in her throat. "Sweetheart, what makes you ask that?" Lily pulled back, her brown eyes serious beyond her years. "Daddy smiles now, like he used to smile in the pictures with my first mommy. And you make him laugh. And you make me happy. I thought maybe you could stay forever and be my family." Tears burned Claire's eyes as she struggled to find the right words. "Lily, I love spending time with you. You have made this year the most special time of my entire life. But you are leaving," Lily said, her voice small and frightened. "The calendar in Daddy's office has a red circle on a day, and I heard him tell someone that is when your contract ends." "What is a contract?" Claire's heart broke into pieces. She had been so focused on her own pain and confusion that she had not considered how Lily would interpret her departure. To this child who had already lost one mother, Claire's leaving would feel like abandonment. "A contract is a promise between adults," Claire said carefully. "But listen to me, Lily. No matter what happens, I will always care about you. You will always be special to me." Lily's face crumpled, and she began to cry in a way Claire had never heard from her. "But I do not want you to go. Please do not leave us. Please." The crisis that changed everything. Nathan heard his daughter's sobs from the hallway and rushed into the room. He found Lily clinging to Claire, both of them crying, and his own carefully constructed walls collapsed. He knelt beside the bed and pulled both of them into his arms, his voice breaking as he spoke. "Lily, sweetheart, please calm down. We can talk about this." But Lily only cried harder, her small body shaking with the force of her grief. "Everybody leaves. Mommy left, and now Claire is leaving, and I will be alone again." The words cut through Nathan like knives. His daughter's pain, which he had worked so hard to heal, was flooding back because of a contract he had created. Because he had been too afraid to speak the truth that had been growing in his heart for months. Claire met Nathan's eyes over Lily's head, and in that moment everything unspoken passed between them. The love, the fear, the desperate hope that somehow this impossible situation could have a happy ending. "Lily," Nathan said firmly, tilting his daughter's chin up to look at him. "What if I told you that I do not want Claire to leave either? What if I told you that I have been trying to find the courage to ask her to stay forever?" Claire's breath stopped. Lily's sobs quieted to hiccups as she looked between her father and Claire with wide, hopeful eyes. The confession. Nathan stood, gently setting Lily back on her pillows, then took Claire's hand and led her to the window. Behind them, Lily watched with bated breath, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "I wrote that contract because I was terrified," Nathan said, his voice raw with emotion. "Terrified of feeling again. Terrified of betraying Rebecca's memory. Terrified of giving my heart to someone who might leave. So I made everything safe and temporary. But Claire, you have shown me that love is not something to fear. It is something to embrace, even when it feels risky and complicated and completely insane." Claire's tears flowed freely now. "Nathan, I am scared too. I am just a teacher from a small apartment. I do not belong in this world of mansions and gallery showings. What if I am not enough?" He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "You are everything. You brought my daughter back to life. You reminded me that joy still exists. You taught me that moving forward does not mean forgetting the past. Claire Bennett, I love you. Not because of a contract or an arrangement, but because you have become the best part of every single day." The question that mattered. "I love you too," Claire whispered, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I have loved you for months, but I was too afraid to say it. Afraid you still belonged to Rebecca, afraid this was just temporary, afraid of wanting something I thought I could never have. Nathan kissed her then, deep and sure, and behind them, Lily giggled with delight. "Does this mean you are staying?" the little girl asked, bouncing on her bed. Claire and Nathan turned to face her, still holding each other. "If your daddy asked me properly, I might consider it," Claire said with a smile. Nathan dropped to one knee right there in Lily's bedroom, still holding Claire's hand. "Claire Bennett, will you forget the contract and all its terms? Will you stay with us not as an employee, but as family? Will you marry me and be Lily's mother and my partner in this beautiful, messy, wonderful life?" "Yes," Claire said without hesitation. "Yes, to all of it." Lily launched herself off the bed and into their arms, and the three of them held each other, crying and laughing at the same time. The contract that had brought them together no longer mattered. What mattered was the love they had built, the family they had become. 1 year later, the gallery was packed with people admiring Claire's latest collection. Beginnings and Transformations, the exhibition was called, featuring paintings that captured her journey from struggling teacher to celebrated artist. But the centerpiece was a portrait of Nathan and Lily in the garden, surrounded by flowers, their faces filled with joy. Claire stood beside her husband, her hand resting on her slightly rounded belly, watching Lily explain one of the paintings to an impressed collector. The little girl wore a paint-splattered dress and spoke with confidence about colors and emotions and how art could heal broken hearts. "She is incredible," Nathan whispered, wrapping his arm around Claire's waist. "She is ours," Claire replied, leaning into his embrace. "We are incredibly blessed." As the evening continued, Claire thought about the desperate woman who had accepted a strange contract 1 year ago. She had been looking for survival, for a way to pay bills and chase distant dreams. Instead, she had found something far more valuable. She had found home, found purpose, found a love that had transformed all of them. The contract had ended, but their story was just beginning. And as Lily ran over to show them a drawing she had made of their growing family, Claire knew that some deals led to destinations far better than anyone could have planned. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life came from the courage to say yes to the unexpected, to trust in possibilities, and to believe that love could rewrite any contract into something far more precious. Their forever had begun with a transaction, but it would continue because of choice, commitment, and the daily decision to build something lasting together. And that was worth more than any amount of money in the world.